July 4, 1947. 9:12 p.m. At 7,000 feet over Idaho, co-pilot Ralph Stevens sees something ahead. Something approaching fast. Instinctively, he flashes the DC-3's landing lights. Universal signal between pilots, ICU. I'm here. There is no answer. Stevens squints. Captain Emil Smith leans forward in his seat. What you see ahead has no wings. It has no tail. And it shouldn't be flying. What the hell is that? What you are about to hear is not science fiction. It's a real case. Documented. Investigated by the FBI, the United States Air Force, and officially classified as unidentified. On July 4, 1947, 3 United Airlines crew members, professional pilots with years of experience, reported following unidentified flying objects for nearly 15 minutes over the skies of the Pacific Northwest. They weren't the first to see flying saucers that summer. In fact, by July 1947, the United States was in the midst of what historians now call the flying saucer craze. But this case was different. Because this time, the witnesses were not confused farmers or excitable civilians. They were aviation professionals. People trained to identify exactly what belongs in the sky, and what doesn't. And what they saw that night remains unexplained more than 75 years later. This is the story of Flight 105. To understand what happened on July 4th, we have to go back 10 days. June 24th, 1947. A private pilot named Kenneth Arnold is flying near Mount Rainier in Washington, searching for the wreckage of a crashed military plane. Suddenly, he sees something impossible. 9 bright objects, moving in formation at a speed that Arnold estimates at over 1,700 miles per hour. For context, in 1947, the fastest airplane in the world barely exceeded 600 miles per hour. Arnold lands in Pendleton, Oregon, and recounts what he saw. A reporter asks him how the objects moved. Arnold replies, like a saucer skipping across water. The next day, the headlines scream, "Flying saucers." And so, a term is born that will define an era. Over the next 2 weeks, more than 800 sightings were reported across the United States. Most were easily explained: weather balloons, conventional airplanes, mass hysteria. But some cases are different. And the most important one of all is about to happen in less than 10 days. Now, let me introduce you to the 3 main characters of our story. Captain Emil J. Smith. Veteran United Airlines pilot. Years of experience. Thousands of flight hours. The kind of pilot people want in command when there's turbulence. And here's the fascinating part: Smith was an outspoken skeptic about flying saucers. Days before the incident, when the flying saucer craze was at its peak, Smith said, and this is documented, "I'll believe in those saucers when I see them." Remember that phrase. First Officer Ralph Stevens. The co-pilot. Professional, experienced. Less biographical information has survived about Stevens, but what matters is this: he's at the controls when it all begins. Marty Morrow. Flight attendant. In 1947, airline flight attendants were rigorously trained. Many had experience as nurses. They were not casual observers. 3 professionals. 3 witnesses. And what they are about to experience will change their lives forever. July 4th, 1947. 9 p.m. Mountain Time. Boise Airport, Idaho. United Airlines Flight 105 is preparing for takeoff. It's a routine flight, Boise to Pendleton, Oregon. A Douglas DC-3, the workhorse of post-war commercial aviation. On board, Captain Smith, First Officer Stevens, Flight Attendant Marty Morrow, and 8 passengers. Night flight. Clear skies. Perfect conditions. As the plane prepares to depart, the control tower makes a joke. Flight 105, keep your eyes open for those flying saucers, okay? Smith probably smiles. He probably rolls his eyes. After all, he doesn't believe in that nonsense. 9:04 p.m. The DC-3 takes off into the twilight sky. 8 minutes after takeoff, the plane climbs through 7,000 feet, approaching its cruising altitude, flying over Emmett, Idaho. Ralph Stevens is at the controls. Smith is beside him. They're flying straight into the sunset. The sky still has that deep orange glow of twilight. And then Stevens sees it. Ahead. More or less at his height. Somewhat approaching. His training takes over. Instinctively, he reaches for the switch and flashes the DC-3's landing lights. Standard signal between pilots, ICU. I'm here. Adjust your course. There is no answer. No return blink. No navigation light. Nothing. Stevens squints. Smith leans forward. And that's when they both realize. Whatever they're looking at ahead, it has no wings. Let me describe what Smith and Stevens are seeing right now. In front of them, against the orange sunset sky, are 5 objects. No planes. No balloons. Disc-shaped objects. Smith would later describe them as bigger than airplanes, although from his position, he could not be sure of the exact distance. What he can say is this. The objects are thin and smooth at the bottom. Rough in appearance on the top. And they are in training. Not moving randomly. Not drifting. In deliberate formation. Smith does what any professional pilot would do. He picks up the radio microphone. Smith, Ontario, this is United 105. Do you have any traffic in our area? We're seeing unidentified objects ahead of our position. Ontario Tower, United 105, negative. We have no reported traffic in your area. Maintain eye contact and report. Smith calls another United flight that is in the area, flying east. None of them see anything. But Smith, Stevens, they still see the objects. Smith needs confirmation. He needs to know he's not going crazy. That Stevens isn't going crazy. That this is real. So he does something smart. Press the intercom button. Smith, Marty, could you come to the cabin for a moment? Marty Morrow enters. Smith doesn't tell her what to look for. She doesn't want to influence her. She just asks, do you see anything in the sky around us? Marty looks out the windshield. And he sees it. 3 professional witnesses. 3 pairs of trained eyes. Everyone seeing the same thing. The objects continue ahead of the DC-3, maintaining their relative position as the aircraft continues to climb towards its cruising altitude of 8,000 feet. Smith pushes the accelerators, trying to close the gap. He cannot reach them. And then, something impossible. The 5 objects, these discs that have been maintaining a perfect formation. They merge. They don't collide. They don't accumulate. They merge, as if they were liquid, or light, or something that doesn't obey the normal rules of physical matter. And then, they disappear. They don't drift away gradually. They don't fade away slowly. They simply disappear. Northwest. In an instant. Smith and Stevens look at each other. What the hell was that? And then, another group appears. To the left of the plane. Ahead. 4 more items. This time, they are arranged in a straight line. 3 together, 1 separate. The plane is now at 8,000 feet, its cruising altitude, flying over rugged terrain toward the Blue Mountains of eastern Oregon. Smith observes carefully. These objects appear to be higher than their flight path. Bigger, perhaps. Or farther away. It's impossible to be sure without reference points. And then. Smith, actual testimony when they left fast. They're there in a moment. Next, accelerating to a speed that no airplane in 1947 could achieve. Disappearing into the distance as if the laws of physics were optional. Smith would later say, "No object I know of could disappear so quickly." Let me give you some perspective on what just happened. This wasn't a 3-second sighting. It wasn't a flash in the corner of my eye. Total duration, between 10 and 15 minutes. Distance traveled while objects were in sight, over 45 miles. Think about that. 45 miles. Almost 15 minutes of continuous observation. Enough time to rule out a reflection. Enough time to dismiss a momentary illusion. Enough time for 3 trained professionals to evaluate, reevaluate, and confirm what they are seeing. Smith and Stevens try everything they can to close the gap. They adjust their course. They increase their speed. It's useless. The objects maintain their distance, as if they were aware of the presence of the DC-3. And when they decide to leave, they travel at a speed that makes the DC-3 appear to be suspended in the air. Eventually, the sky is empty again. Only the hum of the engines. Only the faint glow of twilight. In the cabin, the silence is thick. Flight 105 lands in Pendleton, Oregon, without further incident. The 8 passengers disembark, unaware that the crew has just experienced one of the most significant UFO sightings in history. Why didn't the passengers see anything? Smith has a simple explanation. The positions of the objects were mostly directly in front of us and off the bow. From the passenger seats, with limited windows and restricted viewing angles, there was simply no way to see them. Smith, Stevens, and Morrow get off the plane. They have a decision to make. Do they report this? Do they risk their reputations? Their careers? Smith, the skeptic who said he would believe in records when he saw them. He just saw them. They decide to report it. July 5, 1947. The story explodes. National newspapers publish the story of Flight 105. And this time, it's different. It's not just another farmer saying he saw something strange. He is not just another excitable civilian with a confusing history. They are professional airline pilots. They are United Airlines, one of the most respected airlines in the country. On July 8, newspapers across the country published a photograph. 3 men, comparing notes. On the left, Kenneth Arnold, the pilot who saw the first flying saucers on June 24. In the center, Captain Emil J. Smith. Right, First Officer Ralph Stevens. The implied headline is clear: this is real. They can no longer ignore it. And they can't. Because the reports keep coming in. On the same July 5th, 60 people at a picnic in Twin Falls Park reported seeing 35 discs over a period of 20 minutes. Police in Portland report sightings. Military pilots report sightings. The United States is in the midst of a wave of something. The question is, what? When something like this explodes in the national news, the government has to respond. July 12, 1947. Kenneth Arnold and Captain Emil Smith are interviewed by FBI agents. The full details of those interviews remain classified or lost in the archives, but we know they happened. The FBI is involved. The United States Air Force is also paying attention. Specifically, a unit called Air Material Command, based at Wright Field, Ohio, later known as Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Air Material Command has one job: to assess potential threats to U.S. airspace. And what if there are objects flying over the United States that can outspeed any known aircraft? That is definitely a potential threat. Music, organizational tension. An investigation begins. December 30, 1947. Major General L.C. Craigie, Director of Air Force Research and Development, issues an order. It establishes Project Sign, the first official U.S. government program to investigate unidentified flying objects. Its mission: to collect, compare, evaluate, and distribute to interested government agencies and contractors all information concerning sightings and atmospheric phenomena that may be interpreted as being of interest to national security. Project Sign would eventually become Project Grudge, and then Project Blue Book, the most famous UFO research program in history. But it all starts here. And one of the first cases they study is Flight 105. Air Materiel Command is studying the case of Flight 105 meticulously. Smith and Stevens are interviewed. They check the weather conditions. They consult with astronomers, aeronautical engineers, and optics experts. And finally, they reach a conclusion. Since the sighting occurred at dusk, when illusory effects are more likely, the objects could have been ordinary airplanes, balloons, birds, or pure illusion. Note the key word there, could. They weren't. They could have been. Because here's the problem with that explanation. Ordinary airplanes. Smith and Stevens are professional pilots. They've been flying for years. They know what airplanes look like, from any angle and any lighting conditions. What they saw had no wings. It had no tail. Balloons. Weather balloons move with the wind. They don't maintain perfect formations. They don't merge. They don't suddenly accelerate to incredible speeds. Birds. Possibly the weakest argument. Birds that maintain a perfect formation for 45 miles? Birds that appear as solid disks against the sky? Birds that accelerate faster than any airplane from 1947? Optical illusion. This is the most interesting argument, because optical illusions are real and they do occur, especially at sunset. But 3 independent witnesses. 15 minutes of observation. 45 miles of tracking. Multiple formations. If it is an illusion, it is extraordinarily specific and extraordinarily persistent. And here's the fascinating part. Despite offering all these possible explanations, airplanes, balloons, birds, illusion, when Project Blue Book finally cataloged the case of Flight 105, he is officially classified as unidentified. Case number 34 in the Blue Book files. Status, not identified. Which means that, even by the standards of the United States Air Force, even after all the investigation, they couldn't explain it with certainty. So, if it wasn't an illusion, if it wasn't birds or balloons, what was it? Let's explore the theories. Theory 1, Secret Military Experiments. The United States in 1947 is developing advanced aeronautical technology. Jet aircraft. Rockets captured from Germany. Experiments with unconventional aircraft. Within the Air Force itself, some officers believed that UFOs could be Soviet technology, that the Soviet Union was testing advanced aircraft over American territory. Problem with this theory, even today, more than 75 years later, there is no known technology that can replicate what Flight 105 reported. Objects merging. Instantaneous acceleration. No visible escape or propulsion. Theory 2, Misinterpreted natural phenomena. Perhaps a rare combination of atmospheric conditions, cloud reflections, twilight. Problem, why did only these 3 see it? Why didn't the Ontario Tower see anything? Why didn't the other United Flight see anything? Theory 3. Extraterrestrial. That the objects were of non-terrestrial origin. Ships from another civilization, observing Earth during a period of particular interest, just after the first detonation of atomic weapons, amidst the tension of the Cold War. Problem with this theory, there is no physical evidence. No artifact. No radio signal. No confirmed landing. Only testimonies. Only sightings. But testimonies from extraordinarily credible witnesses. So what happened to Captain Emil J. Smith? Years after the incident, Dr. James McDonald, an atmospheric physicist at the University of Arizona who was investigating UFOs, located Smith. By then, Smith was working in United's New York office. McDonald interviewed him. And Smith confirmed everything. Every detail of the published reports was accurate. But Smith also said something interesting. I would not speculate on the true nature or origin of what I had seen. He only knew what he was in. It wasn't an airplane. It wasn't a balloon. It wasn't birds. It was not an illusion. Beyond that, he refused to guess. And perhaps that is the most honest stance. The man who said, "I'll believe in records when I see them," saw them. And after seeing them, he became more cautious with certainties, not less. Here's one final detail you probably don't know. Flight 105, that specific route, Boise to Pendleton, experienced additional sightings. July 28, 1947. 24 days later. A disc-shaped object is sighted on Flight 105 by a different pair of pilots. August 29. 1 month later. Another crew flying the same route reports unidentified objects. Coincidence? The power of suggestion, pilots expecting to see something because they know Smith's story? Or is there something about that route, that airspace, that attracted whatever those things were? We don't know. So what does the case of Flight 105 tell us? It tells us that there are things in our skies, and by extension, in our universe, that we still do not understand. It tells us that even the most trained observers, the most credible witnesses, can see things that defy easy explanations. He tells us that the United States government took these sightings seriously enough to create decades-long research programs. And it tells us that, more than 75 years later, some cases, like this one, remain genuinely unsolved. Ralph Stevens and Marty Morrow were simply doing their job when the sky showed them something impossible. None of them were seeking fame. None of them were seeking attention. In fact, reporting what they saw risked their reputations. In an era where being taken seriously professionally was everything, they chose to tell the truth about what they experienced. And that truth remains documented in FBI files, Air Force reports, and newspapers of the time. 9 objects. 45 miles. 15 minutes. 3 professional witnesses. No definitive explanation. The Flight 105 case fundamentally changed how the United States, and the world, thought about UFOs. Before July 1947, flying saucers were curiosities. Funny stories. Tabloid material. After Kenneth Arnold's sighting, people started paying attention. But after Flight 105, after professional airline pilots reported the same thing, the phenomenon became legitimate. You couldn't rule it out as mass hysteria. You couldn't attribute it to unreliable witnesses. You couldn't laugh it off and push it away. And that scared some people in positions of power. Because if trained pilots were seeing things they couldn't explain, if objects were flying over U.S. territory that could outrun any known aircraft, what else was up there that we didn't know about? Flight 105 was one of the foundational cases that led to the creation of Project Sign, which became Grudge, which became Blue Book. For more than 2 decades, from 1947 to 1969, the United States Air Force officially investigated more than 12,000 UFO reports. Of those 12,000, the vast majority were explained, weather balloons, airplanes, planets, stars, satellites. But 701 cases, almost 6%, remained officially classified as unidentified. Flight 105 is one of those 701s. And when Blue Book was closed in 1969, the official conclusion was that UFOs did not pose a threat to national security and showed no evidence of advanced technology beyond modern science. But those 701 unidentified cases, they were simply filed away. Unexplained. Unresolved. Archived. As if not knowing the answer were the same as not having a question. And Flight 105 was not an isolated incident among aviation professionals. 1948, Captain Clarence Childs and First Officer John Whitted, Eastern Airlines flight, report a bright cylindrical object near Montgomery, Alabama. 1951, multiple military pilots pursue objects over Texas and New Mexico during the Lubbock Lights case. 1952, the Washington, D.C. surge, unidentified objects appear on radar over the nation's capital, seen by air traffic controllers and pilots. 1986, Japan Airlines Flight 1628 over Alaska reports being followed by a huge object for 50 minutes. 2004, the USS Nimitz encounter. Navy pilots with state-of-the-art cameras capture objects performing impossible maneuvers. Decade after decade, trained professionals, people whose careers depend on correctly identifying what's in the sky, report things that shouldn't be there. And it all begins, in many ways, with Flight 105. Here's the uncomfortable question that Flight 105 raises. If what Smith, Stevens, and Morrow saw wasn't an illusion, if it wasn't planes or balloons or birds, if it remains officially unidentified after 75 years of scrutiny, what was it? And here's the even more uncomfortable question. Why does not knowing bother us so much? As human beings, we feel uncomfortable with mystery. We want answers. We want categories. We want everything to fit into neat, understandable boxes. Plane. Globe. Planet Venus. Explained. Archived. Next. But the universe doesn't owe us neat explanations. And sometimes, very rarely, extremely credible witnesses see things that we genuinely cannot explain. Flight 105 is one of those cases. And maybe, just maybe, that's okay. Perhaps it's okay to say, we don't know. Not as a defeat. Not as a surrender to pseudoscience or magical thinking. Rather, it's an honest acknowledgement that the universe is bigger, stranger, and more complex than we currently understand. Captain Smith understood. After her experience, she refused to speculate about what she had seen. She only knew what it was in. That intellectual humility, that willingness to say, I saw something extraordinary, but I don't know what it was, is, in a way, more scientific than rushing to comforting but inadequate explanations. And here's why this 1947 case still matters in 2024. In recent years, the United States government has begun to take the UFO issue, now called UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, seriously again. 2020, the Pentagon officially confirms the authenticity of UAP videos recorded by Navy pilots. 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence publishes a report admitting that 143 of 144 sightings remain unexplained. 2022 to 2023, congressional hearings on UAPs. Retired military personnel testify about encounters. 2023, former intelligence officer David Grush testifies before Congress about alleged UAP recovery programs. In many ways, we are back where we started in 1947. Credible witnesses. Intriguing but inconclusive evidence. More questions than answers. And the case of Flight 105 remains there, in the archives. A reminder that this is nothing new. This has been happening for a long time. So, what do we learn from Flight 105? Lesson 1. Credible witnesses matter. Smith, Stevens, and Morrow had nothing to gain by reporting what they saw. They risked ridicule. They risked their careers. They reported it anyway. Lesson 2. Multiple evidence matters. 3 independent witnesses. 15 minutes of observation. Multiple formations. The more layers of confirmation, the harder it becomes to rule something out. Lesson 3. Some things remain unexplained. And that doesn't automatically mean aliens. It means that our knowledge has limits. Our technology has limits. Our understanding has limits. Lesson 4. Mystery is not the enemy of reason. You can be skeptical and open-minded at the same time. You can demand evidence and admit when you don't have it. You can be a scientist about the unknown. Captain Emil J. Smith flew thousands of hours in his career. It transported thousands of passengers safely. He was a consummate professional. And one night, in a clear sky over Idaho, he saw something he couldn't explain. He didn't invent it. He didn't exaggerate. He simply reported it. And 75 years later, his testimony, and that of Stevens and Morrow, remains unrefuted. On the night of July 4, 1947, 3 people looked up at the twilight sky and saw something that shouldn't have been there. 9 objects that defied explanation. Technology, if it was indeed technology, that surpassed anything on Earth. They were pursued for 45 miles by a pilot who didn't believe in flying saucers. Until he flew alongside them. The universe is vast. Incomprehensibly vast. Billions of galaxies. Trillions of stars. Countless worlds. And here we are, on this small blue planet, looking up and wondering. Are we alone? Flight 105 does not answer that question. But it reminds us that it's a question worth asking. 75 years later, the case remains open. Officially unidentified. Officially unresolved. And perhaps, somewhere in the cosmos. Whatever Smith, Stevens, and Morrow saw that night. It's still up there. It's still flying. He's still watching. Waiting for the day we finally understand. Thank you for joining me in this investigation of the Flight 105 case. What do you think? Was it an elaborate optical illusion? A misinterpreted natural phenomenon? Secret experimental technology? Or something more? Let me know your theory in the comments. I love reading what you think. If this video made you think, or if you simply enjoyed the investigation, a like really helps the channel. And if you want more cases like this, real mysteries, in-depth investigation, without sensationalism, please consider subscribing. We will soon explore more cases from the 1947 wave, including the Roswell incident, the Maury Island hoax, and other sightings that changed the history of ufology. The universe is full of mysteries. And some of the most fascinating ones are right above our heads. Keep looking up. See you in the next episode.